and happy feast day of the Annunciation. Well, last night I was praying in front of the Blessed Sacrament, and Our Lady spoke into my heart and gave me a message on this feast day. So here goes. My children, tomorrow you will celebrate the feast of the Annunciation, that extraordinary day when the angel Gabriel appeared to me and announced the news of the Incarnation. My children, while many books have been written on these events, the thing that I would like you to meditate on is my innocence and my simplicity. I was not a theologian or a biblical scholar, nor had I any significant education, but, my children, I had simply a heart open to God. This, my children, is what I want you to learn and to take to heart. The Holy Spirit can do great things with simple people, and He often chooses very simple and uneducated people to show the world that loving God is primarily an affair of the heart. My children, you simply do not pray enough with your hearts. You often think too much and ask questions that are only a distraction. I simply asked God how I would conceive and accepted it without asking hundreds of more questions. Time and surrender to God's will answered my questions over time, and so it will for you. My children, you must be simple, and you must call on the Holy Spirit to help you and to allow Him to work through you. I can only help you, my children, if you listen. Well, what a beautiful motherly message. And at the same time, I suppose I'm struck by that end sentence. I can only help you, my children, if you listen. And we can see that even Our Lady, Queen of Heaven, the most beautiful creature, and in love, simplicity, humility, she's reaching down to us in a similar way to the angel Gabriel reached down to her. And yet, she can only help us if we listen, in the same way that she had to listen to the angel Gabriel, and she had to respond. And so going back up to the top of the message, Our Lady makes us think on the fact that so many books have been written on these events. There are even subjects like Mariology, where you can just study all about Mary and this and that and the other. And yet she's asking us today to just meditate on her simplicity and on her innocence. And she even says, because from what we know from the tradition of the church, Mary was somewhere around 14 or somewhere around there anyway. And she wasn't a theologian, she wasn't a biblical scholar, and even at whatever that young age, she had no significant education. And yet the angel Gabriel came to her and asked her to do something extraordinary. And it wasn't because she had a great knowledge of ancient Hebrew and she could speak 5 other languages and she knew the Torah off by heart or whatever. It wasn't any of these things. It was because she had a simple, loving, pure heart that she was just simply able to discern this is from God. And so Our Lady is saying the same thing to us. She's saying that the Holy Spirit can do great things through people, and often simple, uneducated people. And this is to show the world that this loving God is primarily an affair of the heart. And you see, we see that all the time. Even in Medjugorje, Our Lady began to appear all those 40 years ago to these 6 kids. They were only kids. They couldn't prove that it was Our Lady. They didn't have the theological language to understand even what was happening. But yet in their hearts they knew what was happening. And now, 40 years later, it's still going. And even after all sorts of psychological tests and psychological examinations and all sorts of stuff, the apparitions and the miracles have continued. And now we all know Medjugorje is an international place of worship, and things are moving forward every day for Medjugorje to eventually become an officially recognized shrine and apparition site of the church. Same thing when it came to Saint Bernadette or the Visionaries of Fatima. Our Lady chose very, very simple people. And same thing when it comes to the healing ministry. You often find people involved in the healing ministry that have had a supernatural experience of God, and after that, they don't have a fantastically big theology, they have no degree in philosophy. Even I take my own life, my own background was mathematics, I had a degree in mathematics. Then I started having experiences of Jesus and Mary. I hadn't a clue what was happening. But yet in my heart I knew it was God, because I just knew. We know His love, we know His presence. It's like it's an intuitive, ingrained knowing into our hearts. And so Our Lady is saying that we need to be simple. The same thing, the Holy Spirit came on Our Lady then, and Our Lady became pregnant. She didn't say, how is that going to happen? What's the Holy Spirit going to do? How long is it going to take? And will it be this? Will it be that? She just said, be it done to me according to your word. In other words, okay, I don't need to understand all these things to say yes. And so then she goes on to say that you simply do not pray enough with your hearts. And we often think too much and ask too many questions. And not that it's bad to ask questions, but you see, God gives us information on a need-to-know basis. And an example of that is living on providence. You know, when Jesus appeared to me in that vision all those 15 years ago and asked me to leave Ireland and go to France, of course I had 1,000 questions, like what was I going to do for money once I gave up my job? Where is I going to live? What was going to happen? I knew that all these were reasonable questions to ask. But yet I knew that Jesus was asking me to just go to France and to figure it out, to let it happen, and that those answers would come over time. And so it's the same with Our Lady. The answers to a lot of her questions came over time. Who was Jesus? What would He be like? How would she give birth? Where would she give birth? All these things, sometimes we don't need to know, we just need to trust that it will come over time. And so she says, time and surrender to God's will answered her questions over time, and so it will for us. And so eventually then she finishes by saying, my children, you must be simple, and you must call on the Holy Spirit to help you and to allow Him to work through you. And another example of this is in the healing ministry. Often in the healing ministry and evangelization ministry, we're encouraged to just pray for people. Go out, put your hand on someone's shoulder and pray for them. And if we ask too many questions, what are they going to think? Will it work? What if it doesn't work? What if it does work? What will I do? What will I say? What will I not say? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I talk too much? What if I don't say enough? If we think of all these things, we're going to do absolutely nothing. And Our Lady is just saying that we must just be simple. Call on the Holy Spirit, allow Jesus to work through us, and look at the example of Our Lady, who was no great theologian, wasn't a biblical scholar, but had this purity, simplicity in her heart, had this crazy love for God, and abandoned her whole entire life to God, and now is the greatest saint in heaven and is our mother, looking down on us and blessing us. And so today, let us take from this just the simplicity. Let us take from this the Our Lady's simplicity, her love for Jesus, her desire to follow Jesus, her obedience and simplicity when it came to cooperating with the supernatural, her ability as well to step out in faith. She said yes to becoming pregnant. She didn't know what would happen. She didn't know what would happen with St. Joseph. She said yes. So the same thing, Our Lady is a fantastic example of just simply stepping out in faith, trusting in God without having heaps and heaps of knowledge and without having a PhD on biblical theology and on the Holy Spirit, because the Imitation of Jesus Christ in that book, and there's lots of good phrases in that book from Thomas à Kempis. It says stuff like, I prefer to experience love than to know its definition. There's also phrases like, the humble farmer who loves and obeys God is in a better place than the proud philosopher who, asking a million questions, loses himself and loses his soul. So let's not be foolish. Let's love God, be obedient to God, call on the supernatural, call on the Holy Spirit, and allow the Holy Spirit to love through us, to work through us, to evangelize through us, to talk through us, to preach through us, and for us to be great apostles of love for Our Lady in these times, knowing that Our Lady is helping us. But as she said at the end, I can only help you, my children, if you listen. She can only help us if we listen. So let's be children that listen, and let's be children that put into example and do everything we can to follow the Holy Spirit, whatever the cost. Thank you for listening.